Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am so honored to have so many honorable colleagues join us in the House today. As you know, I haven't taken the floor in some time, and I'm going to ask you, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues on all sides of the aisle for some indulgence today. I have every intention of speaking to the substantive motion before us, but before I do that, I have some matters of a personal nature that I have felt in my heart for some time I need to get out. And I'm going to simply say them if the House will grant me that dispensation. Let me first take the opportunity to introduce, whom I have the pleasure of having in Ottawa today, some of the most important people in my life, Mr. Speaker. And that is my parents, Sandra and Anthony Chan. My brother, Dr. Kevin Chan. And of course, my beloved wife, Jane Yip. Unfortunately, our three children, Nathaniel, Ethan, and Theodore, could not join us. The older two are currently in examinations. Although Gene and I will be very pleased to welcome our youngest child, Theo, on Wednesday when he comes down to Ottawa for his graduating field trip. So we're very much looking forward to that. Colleagues, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to simply reference my colleagues to say that, first and foremost, it is a tremendous honor serving as the member of Scarborough Agincourt. And I know that all of us treasure the privilege that we have serving in this particular place. I am so grateful to my constituents of Scarborough Agincourt for having given me a mandate twice to already come and serve this wonderful place. And while it is a very proud thing to serve as Member of Parliament, I simply wanted to say this. There's only one thing that makes me more proud, and that is to simply let my parents know my greater pride is reserved for being, first and foremost, their son. For being your brother, Kevin, and most importantly, to my beloved wife, for being there every step of the way. I simply could not ask for a better partner in life. As I mentioned, one of the, difficult things that often confront those of us, it's not unique to Canadians, but obviously it is a challenge for those of us who serve in public office, is the sacrifices that are made to our families. And I simply want to, if I have any failings to my children, or where I've missed some of their important milestones. Recently, I missed Ethan's jazz concert at his school in order to perform our function here in the House of Commons. Forgive us, but I will explain why there are more important reasons of why we do what we do. And I would say that the most important people in my life have taught me three important lessons, Mr. Speaker. And they are as follows. It's the concepts of dedication, duty, and devotion. On the issues of dedication, I'd have to say that my parents imbued that very much at a very early age to both my brother and I, my younger brother and I, in terms of going and doing your best. I have to say, and I would acknowledge, that I am one that has perhaps not achieved the same standard that my younger brother has achieved in terms of dedication. Dad has often reminded me, Mr. Speaker, that I often relied far too much on my talent and not enough on hard and diligent work, but I would like to think that that was an important lesson that was imbued on both of us. On the second point of duty, and again the point I want to make here is that it was not necessarily done by way of word. It was done by way of practice, by way of the daily way in which my parents lived their lives. And duty, of course, was paramount for them. And I hope that Kevin and I have discharged our duty. I, of course, have the privilege of serving as a public office holder. My brother does it in a different way, as a pediatrician, as a physician, as one who has traveled this planet to serve the least fortunate children in this world. And I am very proud of the accomplishments that you have made so far and the continuing accomplishments that you will do in the future on behalf of our most vulnerable children around the world. And finally, you also taught us devotion. But I also had another very important teacher in that, and that is my wife, Jean. Many of you, of course, know I've been going through this challenge with my health for the last number of years. I simply could not have asked for a more devoted partner in life as I have walked through this journey. And all I have to say, if I could steal a line from a former Prime Minister of ours, the Right Honorable Jean Chrétien, in referencing his partner, Arlene, Jean, without you, nothing, nothing. So, I wanted to get back to, I think, a more fundamental issue, one that has been raised a number of substantive times in this House, and that is how we compart ourselves. And I'm not sure how many more times I will have the strength to get up and do a 20-minute speech in this place, but the point I want to impart upon all of us, I know that we are all honorable members. I know you revere this place. I would beg us to not only act as honorable members, but to treat this institution honorably. And to that extent, I want to make a shout out to our colleague from Saanich Gulf Islands, a parliamentarian that, despite the fact that we are not in the same party, despite the fact that we may disagree on some substantive issues quite vehemently, I consider this particular member to be a giant. Not simply because that she exhorts us to follow Standing Order 18, but more importantly, I've observed in her practice, Mr. Speaker, that she reveres this place. She is dedicated to her constituents. She practices, both here and in committee, the highest standard of practice that any parliamentarian could ask for, despite strongly disagreeing perhaps with the position of the government of the day. She does so in a respectful tone. And I would ask all of us to elevate our debate, to elevate our practice to that standard. We must. It is only through that practice that I believe that she so eloquently demonstrates that Canadians will have confidence in this democratic institution that we all hold so dear. It's important that we do that. The other thing I wanted to speak broadly to my other colleagues is the practice of ditching what I call the canned talking points. I'm not perfect. I know that sometimes it takes some practice. There are instances where it is necessary for us to have the guidance and assistance of our staff and of the ministries and of our opposition research. But I don't think it gives Canadians confidence in our debate in this place when we formalistically repeat those debating points. I think it's more important that we bring our experience, that we bring the experience of our constituents here and impose it on this question of the day, and to ask ourselves, how do we get better legislation? How do we make better laws? We can disagree strongly. In fact, we should. That is what democracy is about. But don't talk to just formalistic talking points. It doesn't elevate this place. It does not give Canadians confidence in what democracy truly means. And so the other thing I would simply ask all of you, ask all of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, to consider, while we debate and engage, what we're doing right now, when we listen to one another, despite our strong differences. That's when democracy really happens. That's the challenge that's going on around the world right now. No one's listening. Everyone's just talking at one another. We have to listen to each other. And in so doing, we make this place a stronger place. I have some comments that I want to speak broadly to Canadians before I get to the substantive issue that was introduced in the main motion by our friend from Sucker Interlake Eastman. I know that sometimes we may find, and we're about to enter question period, and I have to be honest, I'm one that's beginning to find it challenging to watch. Maybe it's because I'm on the government side. I certainly participated with some glee at times on the opposition side, but I recognize that, and maybe my perspective has changed now that I have had a change of position in this place in the House, although I don't face the daily barrage, unlike members of the government. But I believe strongly that despite what we see in this place, what gives us strength is the fact that we can actually do it, that we can actually engage in this process without fundamental rancor, without fundamental disagreement, without violence. That's the difference. And that's why I so love this place. It's because we can do that. And I would ask Canadians to give heart to their democracy, that they treasure it, revere it. Of course, I would ask them in the most basic of things, to cast their ballot. But for me, it's much more than that. I ask them for their civic engagement, regardless of what it actually may mean. Whether it's going out and coaching a soccer team, whether it's helping someone at a food bank. But for me, it can be even something simpler than that. I know many are challenged with their time. It's the basic common civility that we share with each other to me that is most fundamental. It's thanking your Tim Hortons server. It's giving way to someone on the road. It's saying thank you. It's the small things that we collectively do, from my perspective, that make a great society. And fundamentally, to me, that is ultimately what it means to be a Canadian. We are so privileged to live in this country because we have these small acts of common decency and civility that make us what we are. And I would ask you to carry on that tradition, because ultimately that is the foundation of what makes Canada great. So I would simply say this. If I may quote actually the Constitution, in some ways, from my perspective, it imbues peace, order, and good government. Sorry, I would go to my friend from Lanark, Kingston Frontenac, who would appreciate that particular point, that it is, in fact, those small little things that we have to do. And so we have much to be proud of. And I would simply ask us to celebrate this incredible institution. And in so doing, by doing those small acts, we will continue to uphold our Canadian democracy and the very values that bind us together. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I would be remiss. I think that it would be inappropriate if I didn't speak to the substantive motion of the day. And so with the remaining 5 minutes that I have been afforded, I will briefly address the motion that our friend from Selkirk Interlake Eastman has put before us, so that if you wish to ask questions, we at least have the opportunity to engage in it, because I may not have actually addressed it at all. Let me just simply say that I think that the motion that the members brought forward, I understand where it comes from, why I profoundly disagree with it. And I disagree with it respectfully from the perspective of, and I'll make sort of 3 quick criticisms. First, I recognize that it attempts to essentially address or provide a certain narrative that a particular party is good at managing the economy, a particular party is not so good at managing the economy. And it then tries to put a bit of piecemeal reasons why that, in fact, is the case. I would first argue that it is difficult to evaluate the economic performance of a particular government 18 months in any truly meaningful way, given the measures that have been taken. I accept very much that you can attack certain measures that the government has brought in place, and whether you agree or disagree with it. I think that obviously is a point of reasonable debate. But I would argue that to suggest that we have led to some kind of profound economic catastrophe or failure at this present time is simply premature. And that I would argue that it would take some time yet to evaluate whether the policies of this government will lead to long-term sustainable economic growth. The second point that I wanted to say is that I would say that my second criticism really is that I think that there are a lot more complicated variables that go into the issues of economic performance, of which this particular motion, in my respectful view, does not address. I would argue that there are broad parameters related to innovation, about where the economy ought to go, that are not captured perhaps in this particular motion. And the final point I would raise, and I would simply suggest that in some ways my view of this particular motion is that it is somewhat nostalgic in terms of its viewpoint. It tends to look at our economy as a whole in terms of what it was or what it used to be, as opposed to what it ought to be or where it ought to go. And so from my perspective, it does not address what I consider to be some of the much broader forces of global technological change that I think this government is attempting to fundamentally address and to ask those critical questions in terms of where do we need to ultimately go in terms of positioning our national economy in moving things forward. So I would simply offer those as quick criticisms of the substantive motion that is before the House today. But I do thank the honourable member from Selkirk Interlake Eastman for bringing it forward. It raises an important question about the direction of our economy. It will ultimately be I think, the interplay between the parties in terms of where we think our country ought to go. I would simply ask the honourable member to also consider it from the perspective of taking our country as a whole, as opposed to in piecemeal, which again, I think this motion in some respects has a propensity towards regionalizing, which I would feel is an inappropriate way to approach when a government is attempting to address issues of the national economy. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for your time.
Questions and comments? Commentaire. The honourable member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think it's days like this that all members of this chamber are very proud to sit in the House of Commons. So, since this is questions and comments, I will choose the comment option for a change, Mr. Speaker, because that eloquent address from the honourable member from Scarborough Agincourt is a reminder to all parliamentarians on how we can strive to do better. I'm very fortunate to call the honourable member a friend. We're both lawyers, we're both by-election winners, but we both fell in love with politics through Queen's Park. My father in my case, but that honourable member from working there for Premier McGuinty. And the House is better when our friend is here sharing his thoughts like he has today. Mr. Speaker, through you to that honourable member and to Jean, Nathaniel, Ethan and Theodore, I want them to know that we refer to each other in this House by custom as honourable. But that member, by the way he's comported himself and the way he's added to our debate, truly deserves that title, Mr. Speaker. The way he's treated his colleagues, the way he's approached debate and procedure in this House has been nothing short as honourable. And I'm glad he mentioned the small things, because his friendship and the small things have meant a lot to me since his time in this place, Mr. Speaker. And I'll end with one reflection. When I was traveling for months across this great country on a leadership bid that didn't go quite the way I'd hoped, it was tiring. But you know what's reassuring, what Canadians should know? I got nice notes even from Liberals and NDP members wishing me well. And I'll never forget the day I was in Vulcan, Alberta. And I, of course, tweeted that with the Liberal government, we were no longer going to live long and prosper. And one of the funniest tweets in rejoinder to that was from my friend, the honourable member from Scarborough and Agincourt, who said that he thought my comment was highly illogical, but that he wished me well. And his notes and his reassurance has really fueled my passion to serve the public. And I'll end my remarks on behalf of all members of this chamber, much the way I ended that Twitter exchange. We have been and shall always be your friend.
The honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague from Durham, a friend indeed, also unfortunately, a fellow Trekkie or Trekker, depending on your characterization. I unfortunately have not had the pleasure of visiting Vulcan, although I wish I could be teleported to that place someday, although others might argue that the blood that runs in my veins probably is a different color than red. I would argue otherwise. Let me simply say that I am deeply grateful for my colleague's friendship. More importantly, from my perspective, and this is in no way disrespect to the leader of the official opposition, I personally am glad that he is not currently the leader of the official opposition.
Comments. The honourable member for Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to begin by simply associating myself with the eloquent remarks of the member for Durham and to say through you how much the NDP in its entire House of Commons family respects the honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt. I was talking with my colleague from Courtenay, Alberni, who reminded me of how eloquent the member was when we had an orientation for new members and how meaningful that was when he came forward. I was so taken by his remarks today, not only about the work-life balance health issue that he addressed, but also the need to say thank you to people at the Tim Hortons, as he pointed out, or be a little more civil in the roads. And he exemplifies that tradition of civility that we hope we can sometimes get back in a more meaningful way in this place. Mr. Speaker, I had the honour and privilege to attend an event in the honourable member's riding of Scarborough Agincourt during a time of a controversial debate involving medical assistance in dying. So I got a chance to see the member in action with his constituents, and I can report to the House without a shadow of a doubt just how much he was respected and indeed loved by the members who were there. I want to say to Gene and his family, I know how important it is for all of us to have family to hold us up. I know how much they've held up this member as well. On behalf of the New Democratic Party, I simply want to say how much we appreciate this member. Thank you.
The honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, let me thank my friend from Victoria and the third-party House Leader for his very generous comments. From my perspective, it cuts both ways. It was, in fact, his generosity as the New Democratic Party justice critic who was willing to come to speak in a government member's riding on a highly controversial bill, Bill C-14, that I think demonstrated the strength of this House. It demonstrated that despite, and if you actually look at our voting record, we always voted at opposite ends on all of those amendments and the main motion throughout. And yet, we could engage in a civil debate in my constituency, engaging with constituents that had a diverse view, a diverse way of views on that particular subject matter. That is exactly the point I was trying to make earlier, Mr. Speaker. Parliament is a place of disagreement in terms of the debate. We don't have to be disagreeable. And I think my friend from Victoria is a shining example of exactly that, and I thank him for his friendship.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my honourable friend from Scarborough Agincourt, I'm absolutely speechless at his words of praise, because he is also hold up the mirror to someone who is a shining example of parliamentary excellence. I had the great good fortune that when he was first elected at a by-election, he was seated right there. So we were neighbors. I often tell my constituents that, you know, the Liberals used to be so irrelevant, they had to sit with me. And I'm a long way from a lot of my old friends on that side of the House. But we never were far away. The member for Scarborough Agincourt, I want to thank him again, because I've thanked him privately, for a message he sent me when I was trying to decide if I should stay on as leader of my own party. And against all expectations the public might have of partisanship, his message to me meant the world to me. And it's one of the reasons that I stand here not just as the member for Saanich Gulf Islands, but as leader of the Green Party of Canada. And from the depth of my soul, I thank him, I thank Gene, I thank his family for all of the contributions he made and has made and will continue to make in this place and everywhere across Canada. His words should be etched in marble so we remember what it is that makes us Canadian is that we're willing to decide it's important to be kind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, I will be brief. You simply know, the member simply knows in what esteem that I hold of him. I think simply the words that she has just said speak for themselves, and I will let them stand.
We have time for one more question and response. The honourable member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member from Scarborough Agincourt for one of the, if not the, most powerful, meaningful, and wise addresses that I have heard in this place. Mr. Speaker, the member credits the member across the way from Saanich Gulf Islands as, in his terms, carrying out the highest level of practice. And I would agree with him in that statement, but I also put him in the same category, carrying out the highest level of practice. Mr. Speaker, over the last few months, I've had the privilege of serving on the PROC committee with the member from Scarborough Agincourt, and I have to tell you that his example has been nothing short of inspirational. So I actually have a question to the member I'd like to put. What advice can you give to us as to how to reach that magical place? That place where you take compassion and kindness. Then you build into there wisdom, insight, intelligence. And then you build into there a respect for your constituents with everything you do, a respect for your family who you love dearly, and at the end of the day, serving your constituents to the best possible place you can be and you can do. How do we get to that place? What words can you leave us?
The honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt.
Let me first thank my friend from Hamilton West, Dundas Ancaster, for her generosity in the most personal of ways. Only you know what this means. My advice is simple. Use your head, but follow your heart. It's as simple as that.